views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello, my name is Noah Osborne, and I'm a reporter for NPR affiliate WFUV. This is Bronx Connections, a collaboration between WFUV, BronxNet Television, and Norwood News. Today I'm joined by Christina Hanson, the Executive Director of POTS. That's an acronym for Part of the Solution. I'm also joined by Raymond Pultinas, the founder and director of the James Baldwin Outdoor Learning Center. They're joining me on Zoom to discuss the crisis of food insecurity. It's a crisis that has long affected much of the Bronx as well as the country and was made worse by the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, it was projected that 11% of American households were food insecure. Now, this number has risen to nearly 18% for households with children. Feeding America projects that 42 million people may experience food insecurity in 2021. The statistic includes 1 in 6 children do not have enough food. As we prepare to kick off the holidays with Thanksgiving, many communities are left struggling to feed themselves and their families. Christina and Raymond are with me to discuss what their organizations are doing to combat food insecurity and how we can all get involved. So it's truly a pleasure to be joined by community leaders like yourselves that are really taking the time to fight the problem of food insecurity. So I'd just like to get into a bit of who you are and what your respective organization does and continues to do to help underserved communities and continue to combat this problem. So let's start with Ms. Hanson.
Hi, Noah. Thank you so much. My name is Christina Hanson, and I'm the Executive Director of Part of the Solution, more commonly known as POTS. We're located near Fordham University in the Bronx, and we provide several responses to the problem of food insecurity in the Bronx. First, we have a food pantry and a community dining room where people can come and get a hot lunch. So that's the direct solution. If people don't have food, we'll provide them with access to groceries or a hot meal. Since food insecurity is very often connected to problems of having inadequate funds, we help people access funds in different ways, be it through connecting people to public benefits like SNAP or public assistance, support for rent arrears or ongoing rental subsidies, things like that, to help make sure that their general financial life is stronger and are then therefore able to access food.
Got it. Great. Well, definitely appreciate it as always. Definitely something that we really need to really be part of the solution. So I applaud you for your efforts on that front. Mr. Pultinas, let's get into what your organization does.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Ray Pultinas. We're pretty hyper-local. I'm the director of the James Baldwin Outdoor Learning Center. We 501c3 that started in 2018. And we've worked with POTS before. We've donated food, produce from our garden. We admire POTS. Really, you are the model in the community to really live up to. But just that kind of thinking of community. Our mission is to strive for project-based solutions at the juncture of food, environmental and social justice. And we run a farmers market every Saturday. We've been able to do through that farmers market quite a bit of mutual aid work. So we have been purchasing produce that was unsold by the farmers, and we redistribute it through the community fridges. So helping meet food insecurity in that way. But thus far this year, we've been able to donate 5,000 pounds of food. So we're proud of that. And, just like a little small organization, which is pretty self-sufficient, all of us are volunteers.
Glad to hear. I'd also, we're going to be coming back to that farmers market in a bit too. So let's hang on for that one. So I'm going to direct this question to Ms. Hanson. So POTS has a reputation for being so much more than a food kitchen in the sense that it provides dental care, health care, haircuts, even clothing. However, it wasn't long ago when the pandemic really stifled a lot of these services from being provided in small businesses like barbershops and some clothing stores. So I'm curious, how has the pandemic affected your ability to really provide some of these services to underserved communities?
It certainly changed the way the services. So for example, the shower and haircut programs both went on hiatus for a little while. We have restarted both. We've been doing them for a number of months now. with social distancing and all sorts of extra precautions. But we have been providing both showers and haircuts on site. Otherwise, a lot of our services moved to being remote. Our various case management, legal, mentoring, employment connections, all of those went remote for a period of time. And again, we're back to offering some of those services, both in person and remotely. It's a little less in person. We used to have hundreds of people just coming through the building every day. It was kind of it was a fun environment, but we don't have that kind of flow anymore largely because of the fact that the community isn't fully vaccinated yet. We don't want to have lots of people packed into a tight space, but we're recognizing that one-on-one service, that personal service is really what makes our organization work well with our community members. It builds trust, it creates a narrative and a dialogue. It helps our staff understand what's going on in our clients' lives. And so prioritizing those connections, that in-person service is something that we have tried to do whenever possible. And we never fully shut down. We've been providing food on site throughout the pandemic.
And so, Mr. Pultinas, we're going to come back to that the farmers market. So it's incredible to see how the farmers market was able to be so successful throughout the pandemic. It had quite an impressive run from the summer. I think it was about May 15th, and it ends about November 20th, just a few days from this discussion here. So get into that a bit. What was that like, providing food for underserved communities during the summer? And how has that sort of changed from what you saw before to like where we are currently right now?
Well, I mean, in many ways, we started the farmers market last summer in August of 2020, right in the midst of the pandemic outbreak, and during the time of extreme quarantining. And it was a safe space to have a market. And, at that time, people were afraid to go to the grocery store and, be in enclosed spaces. So it really kind of, I guess, fostered a community around accessibility to food. And, since that time, we have been able to grow as an organization through this pandemic, because it's like we're meeting a real need that we probably hadn't, realized as much before. Lately we've been trying hard to kind of work a model where, everybody, we can, administer our services to anybody who is hungry, or so we're starting to also produce food at the market, and just try to play around with ways of getting that food to people at whatever expense they can pay for it.
I'd also like to allude a bit to what you had mentioned in terms of need, like assessing where the need is during this farmers market. From what you've been able to see, where has the need seemed like most prevalent?
Primarily, I think the need is for community, and places to gather. What I think has been really great for us is we have almost an ideal setting for a market where families can come with their children, and there's gardens close by and places on the lawn to relax. So we're kind of in many ways we're not consumerist driven. We're all volunteer driven. We don't like to necessarily promote people to buy things just for the sake of buying. So we are trying to really it's a different kind of market where people don't just go in and out. They kind of hang out, and we have done a lot of educational programming. We want to do more of that as well, but we kind of give people a reason to come together, I think, and to enjoy each other's company and to feel a sense of belonging. And I think even in solving some of those bigger issues of, poverty and homelessness, it all begins with feeling, people feeling belonging to a community. And I know that part of the solution, is really very much involved in that same kind of work.
And our country is currently dealing with a problem that might try to serve as a hurdle to that, or might potentially serve as a hurdle to that goal. And what we're seeing right now in terms of worker shortages and supply chain shortages. And because of that, it might exacerbate the problem of food insecurity due to the fact that we might be looking at empty shelves in supermarkets. We might be looking at rising prices for food as well. So I'd like to start this one off with Ms. Hanson. What damage do you believe that, these sort of shortages will do to communities already struggling to get a meal to eat?
So there has been fairly well documented inflation in food, and so obviously any growth in cost of food is a challenge for people who have limited resources to access food. We haven't seen the kind of thing where food is inaccessible. Food has been available, local food, there's food that's grown in New York State, there's food that's grown around the world. We've found that we haven't had any supply chain shortages from that point of view, but of course, as the price increases, which it has been recently, it's going to present challenges for families. And, hopefully we find our way out of this over the next few months and it resolves itself. But yeah, that's, obviously price changes are always going to be a challenge for families who are living on the margins.
Always. Mr. Pultinas?
Well, community gardens, and we're part of a community food hub programs that are, being sponsored by Bronx Green Up, and there are food hubs available throughout the Bronx connected with community gardens. And I think, it's why certainly, it probably can't meet the total needs of the population. It really is points to a direction of, self-sufficiency. We rely too much on imported food, that has a tremendous carbon footprint, so growing locally and kind of seeing our green spaces as potential growing spaces, I think is even psychologically, we become more stronger by understanding that we have abilities to grow food on our own. Even in the high school where we're connected to Teens for Food Justice started a hydroponic farm, which unfortunately because of the pandemic now has been closed for a couple of years. But there is so much potential for us to be a food producing society, and I think it's to our future benefit to rely less and less on supply chain kind of situations where we're dependent on people very far away to provide our food source. And I think we can do much more locally, and it's just through example too, showing kids how to garden and how to plant and even how to forage. While again not serving the entire need, it does provide for those who kind of key into it a kind of an inspiration to be more self-sufficient.
Staying on this a bit in terms of like cultivating a healthier Bronx community, I'd like to address this next question to the both of you. What goes through your minds when you're being part of, doing such good work for the Bronx community, knowing that the Bronx really has grown reliant on some of the services that you're providing, as well as the assistance? Like, how do you feel knowing every time that you're able to be a part of something that's really helping the Bronx to push through? Let's start with Ms. Hanson this time.
I think one of the things that we try and do here at POTS is not just focus on the immediate challenge that families are facing, but work to ensure that there's a longer term plan for removing those challenges. And, we are very proud of the work that we've done during the pandemic and prior to the pandemic to provide services here. There are a lot of people who were in difficult situations who are not in difficult situations because they had access to places, like Raymond's program, like our program. We can make a lot of difference, and hopefully, we can't do everything. There is a need for different types of changes in the world that can help support, can help level the playing field, can help make sure that families have access to the resources that they need, that they can get jobs that support their lives, that if they're raising children and those types of jobs aren't available, that there are other options. And we need both. We need places that will serve people's needs when they're facing crisis and help them find a pathway forward. But we also need to think about how we want our society to be so that there is less of a reliance in a place like the Bronx on places like Bronx.
I think, I mean, I feel, so fortunate to be part of, this movement and to be, to have purpose. I think so many people in our communities, are really struggling with that, especially, they don't see, they're not inspired, and they don't necessarily see a way out, and it feeds into bad behaviors perhaps, but I think that I feel that when people are offered a place to belong, and even more so given a kind of a purpose, it really makes life worth living. So kind of, and I don't know the magic formula about that, and but certainly leading by example is great, and I all of our organization, we're so pumped at what we've been able to achieve, and feeling the vibe of the market every Saturday is very pleasurable. So connecting people to things that matter and to activities that give our lives purpose, I think is such a great healing, in addition to the good food. It really is healing the spirit and the body and the mind. So.
Yeah, and staying on that for a bit, in terms of what the sort of community vibe had felt like, as we've just sort of alluded to here. Have there been any sort of community responses that have stuck with you in terms of like what you've been doing with the Gardens Farmers Market? Ms. Hanson, you can also chime in here if there have been any sorts of community responses that have really stuck with you, or really wanted to further motivate you to continue to do these good works. So Mr. Pultinas, you can start this one off.
I mean, one example, we had, I don't want to get too much into it, but we did have a little bit of adversity earlier in the year, this year, just on the part of the school administration, some of whom misunderstood us, I guess. But there was a time when, at the very beginning of the year, we had lost our permits, to operate on the campus, and we were faced with an eviction. So the community wouldn't have it. Our first market actually was very much a protest against that really kind of reckless decision on the school's administration's part. But it really galvanized our community, and we had a protest, sit-ins. We, really fostered a kind of a community spirit to stand up for ourselves. This was a community space that had been developed during pandemic, and it seemed to have been arbitrarily dismissed, because it didn't meet, specific, kind of data-driven needs of the school administration. And, but, being able to kind of bring the community together and to resist that kind of thing, I think was, really important, to show, it helped in the formation of our community, because they bonded over this adversity, and as a result, we've become stronger. Another example, and this is, really just when we had been doing all our sit-ins, and a lot of children were writing on the sidewalk, save our garden, because it was under threat, and, they wanted to evict us, and all of that has been, that's gone now. The threat of eviction is over. But during that initial time when everything was in question, children were riding on the sidewalk. Well, one of our community members, who was pretty, at the time, kind of down and out, but a brilliant person, brilliant mind and a playwright, decided to pick up on the story, and he wrote a whole play on our situation. People pick up on that, and even one person changing their life around something that you do is significant.
Definitely an inspirational story. Yours is definitely an inspiration there. I apologize that you had to go through so much adversity, just to bring help to the community, but I'm glad to see that everything that you yourself, your organization was made stronger as a result. So I definitely commend you on that. Ms. Hanson, is there anything you'd like to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. So POTS relies pretty heavily on volunteers to do a lot of its work, especially through the food programs. Moving around 2 million pounds of food, it doesn't move itself, and serving meals and making sure the food is cooked every day and all of that stuff. We rely heavily on volunteers. We have both a staff and volunteer relationship, and there are so many people who come from our community who do this work and have throughout the pandemic, despite there are a lot of people who are afraid to come out, but people really felt that it made them whole to come and be a part of POTS's work during this difficult time. And it was amazing to see how many people wanted to come and be here and part of the community and part of the service together. Sometimes people who, receive service from POTS are volunteers at POTS, and sometimes it's other people, but it is really just a wonderful place where so many different people can come together and move towards a similar goal. And it's been nice to watch.
Yeah, it's definitely what we need in times like these, people, communities coming together. And speaking of that, we have the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday. So I'd just like to sort of posit to both of you, in what regard would this Thanksgiving holiday sort of be different for your organizations in terms of Thanksgiving holidays from years past? Is the sort of mission sort of changed? Has the urgency sort of changed? Let's start off with you, Ms. Hanson.
Certainly this year at Thanksgiving, there's a lot of change in the air. There are a lot of people, we're still dealing with a lot of effects from the pandemic, be they mental or just people, the employment rate's still pretty high in the Bronx. And so there are lots of challenges that people are dealing with as they come to Thanksgiving holiday. We are glad that we have found a way to be able to do a in-person service for those who don't have a place to go, should they be vaccinated. And this year, so we're looking forward to that. And so there are ways in which there are green shoots and things are going back to ways that we can, be more personal and be more together, even in the cold winter months. And I hope that many people in our community are able to celebrate with their families and have, a wonderful and safe holiday this year because of, vaccination and all of that stuff. So that's my hope, that we get through this holiday and it starts to feel a little bit more normal for all of us. And I think that'll be good for everyone in every way.
Yeah, definitely the pervading hope around this time for sure. Mr. Pultinas, is there anything you'd like to contribute?
Yeah, well, I think, certainly this year is different in that, we feel because we operate an outdoor market, and we're limited in terms of, carrying over into the fall and winter months. This year we are going to be doing monthly pop-ups, and to kind of keep our organization kind of alive during the winter. So this is something that we're doing for the first time, and trying to bring our vendors, and our kind of style of communicating and community building and sharing of poetry and ideas. We're trying to bring it to Bronx communities on a monthly basis. So we're looking for different venues. We were able to forge some good relationships this year with Tracy Towers, which is a local high-rise building, mixed incomes, and so just trying to really solidify and build on our relationships with all of our community during the winter months, I think is really important. And we want to be a kind of a different kind of market, and really based on having access and providing knowledge and learning about healthy food and how it's grown. And so it's kind of an alternative, non-commercial type of market. So I think we have to work harder. We don't necessarily want to become big and commercial or anything like this. You know, we want to really maintain these close community connections. But I guess this year, as opposed to last year, we feel like this work is important to really keep going during the winter.
Actually, I'm pretty happy to hear that you guys have both touched base on your respective sorts of plans for this Thanksgiving. So I guess the final question I'd really like to issue is what can community members of the Bronx do to make Thanksgiving possible for underserved communities? What sorts of things can they get involved in to really help, you know, put in an effort as much as you guys have in your respective organizations? So let's start this one with Ms. Hanson.
Yeah, so I'm sure there are a number of food drives that people can participate in. A lot of distributions already happening around Thanksgiving meals. So, you know, often there's a lot of volunteers willing on Thanksgiving, and depending on the organization, maybe those slots have filled up. But I would say, you know, making sure that you know what your local community organization is, your local mutual aid, your local community fridge, trying to make sure that there's food there so that families can provide a you know, rich and full Thanksgiving for their family.
I would just add that you know, holidays are kind of good touch points, I guess, for people to come together. And but there are a lot of lonely winter days in between. So, you know, really keeping you know, constant, you know, with watching out for each other, especially during the lonely winter months, I think is really important. And you know, to just encourage people to see the bounties that most people in our society, you know, have, and to kind of like, I guess, you know, try to encourage people to find joy in sharing what they have.
A big thank you to Christina Hanson of POTS and Raymond Pultinas of the James Baldwin Outdoor Learning Center. To learn more about POTS, visit potsbronx.org, and to learn more about the James Baldwin Outdoor Learning Center, visit jamesbaldwinoutdoorlearningcenter.org. That's all the time we have for Bronx Connections today, but I'd like to thank you for sticking around. I'm Noah Osborne. Take care.